What holds leaders back from making decisions?
I think a lot of things hold leaders back. I think one of the main things would be insecurity. A lot of leaders have a hard time owning the role that they're in because they get caught up in where they know that they come short or fall short. I think a lot of leaders are held back by their need for too much consensus building. They want to make everyone happy, and they don't want people to dislike them. So they want to make sure everyone builds consensus with them before they make the final decision. I think that's two things that hold people back, and there are probably a lot of other things.
So overcoming those, well, number one, you have to not try to make everyone happy, and you have to be more secure in your decision-making. Does that improve as you're a leader for a longer period of time?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the longer you are in a leadership role, the more security you find. I think there are a lot of things you can do to build that security and to stop being so afraid of hurting people's feelings, because you will never make everyone happy. But you hear me talk a lot about relational leadership, relationship building. The more you focus on that, the deeper relationship you have with everyone that you're working with on your team, the easier it is to make a decision, because they know fundamentally where your heart is and that you care about them. And it just kind of takes away that whole thing around, oh, well, their feelings are hurt and they don't feel seen or heard and things like that.
Yeah, when Dave talks about delegation, he says you have to trust their integrity and their competency. And a lot of that stems into decision-making. If I can trust your integrity, your competency, then I trust the reason and the heart behind the decision that Suzanne made, even if I don't agree with it.
Right.
And that's a tough place to get to. That takes time to build that kind of relationship.
Yeah. That is so powerful, because we talk a lot about being able to disagree and commit, and that's where that comes out of that trust that's built. Because if I fundamentally trust your competency as my leader, trust your heart and what your motives are, then I can also accept you're a human being and you're going to make mistakes, and I won't always disagree with things, but I can commit to being under your leadership and being on your team.
That's good. So let's talk about making good decisions. We at Ramsey, we make them based on principles and values, which is a super helpful filter. So what does that look like in our day-to-day?
Several years ago, our operating board spent some time, and we used past decisions that we had made over the years to come up with a list of 10 basically guiding principles that we call the Ramsey way of making business and leadership decisions. And we've put those in a document. They're very simple, and not every company would want this same list. But for us, this is the list that we use to guide us. And they don't apply to every single thing, every time, every nuance. But these 10 things, which the very first thing is we pray. So first and foremost, as leaders in this organization, we're committed to prayer. That doesn't mean we stop and have a prayer service before we make every decision, right? But that means in the morning, my first priority is being in the Word and having some time of prayer and having a posture as a leader and as a person just in life of being a prayerful person and seeking God. And so as I walk throughout my day and have to make decisions, like that's already in place. And God can impart wisdom and discernment into my life because of that helps me make, hopefully, the right decisions most of the time.
Yeah, that's a good start, a good way to center you to go, is this just my own emotion and ego, or is this really the best thing to do?
Yeah.
So beyond the principles, we also talk about seeking counsel. A lot of leaders feel like they have to do it alone. It's all on them. How do you go about that process, especially if you may not have a leadership team around you?
Yeah, that's a big one for me. I hate making decisions by myself, and sometimes I have to. But I always tell other leaders, like, you need a posse. And I have multiple layers to my posse, right? Like I've got a pretty wide posse that consists of quite a few people that have different skills than I do, different strengths than I do, and they kind of balance me out. And then I have like a core posse that I make very few decisions without even just a quick text to them or a quick email. And I'm not talking about simple day-to-day, just in the flow of things. I'm talking about bigger decisions that still can come up day to day, but like they have a lot broader implications. And so To me, there's wisdom in that. That's not an insecurity thing. It's being wise, and it's seeking out the wisdom of people who think different than you and have different skill sets and different strengths because, again, that balances you out.
And you're using a lot of discernment there to go, okay, I'm going to go to this person because I trust their specific experience, skills, wisdom in this area.
Like I tend to be very emotionally charged. That's how I live my life. That's how.
We call it passion. That's all.
Okay, that's great. But the people that work closely with me know it's emotionally charged. And so that can be good and it can be bad. And I have to be self-aware and know that about myself so that a lot of times I can seek counsel and wisdom from people who are a lot more logic-based. And sometimes they seek for a lot more clarity than I personally need, but there's a really good balance in the middle there if we just talk through something even quickly.
Mm-hmm. So we also talk about kind of gathering options. And usually if you're not ready to make a decision, it's because you don't feel like there's enough options on the table. Mm-hmm. People feel like they get backed into a corner and it's either A or B. How do you go about that process?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, but I also want to caution that you don't need too many options. Now, personally, the way I'm wired, I don't need a lot of options. I am a high D on the disc, and so I am more decisive by nature. And I don't personally require a ton of data and a ton of information for me to feel good about a decision. That's not always a good thing, but that's just how I'm personally wired. But Dave has taught us really well over the years that if we're coming to present a new idea, something new that we want to take into the marketplace, we don't ever bring him one option. We bring him at least two, preferably three. And then we always tell him of these three options, which we use a team to come up with. That's not just me in a vacuum figuring that out. But of these three options, Dave, we like option B. And here's why. And so not only do you bring options to the table, but you need to be willing to say, this is the one I like, and this is why I like it the most.
That's really good. And when it comes to making those decisions, we're always scared about making the wrong one. And we talk about kind of walking through the worst case scenario. If we make this decision, is it reversible? Is it irreversible? How does that help to walk through that worst case scenario?
Oh, that's so smart to do. One of our principles on our list of 10 is that we do consider unintended consequences, because something can sound right or feel right in the moment. Sometimes if it's, again, emotionally charged just as a result of what it is. But if you don't stop and think through the worst case scenario a year from now because of this decision, or unintended consequences that could happen to team members as a result, which if you just literally give it a minute and think about it, especially like in a brainstorm type format with a team, even if it's a small team, like it just helps you process the information so that when you make the decision, you're more well-informed.
Well, and decisions usually lead to some form of change, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so understanding the effect that it will have as it trickles down to the team and what workload this creates and what's already on their plate, you have to be thinking about that as a leader.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because what that requires you to end up doing is communicating better about the decision. The time you take to think through unintended consequences or, again, worst case scenario, that will lead you to have a much better communication plan about whatever the decision is and the changes that will occur as a result of it.
That's big. And communicating it feels like 90% of a decision is communicating that decision over and over.
Yes.
So that there's a lot of clarity with the team and no one's upset. We're not out here to just upset the team. That's not the goal.
Oh, and we always tell people, like, about the time you've said it so many times that you're tired of hearing yourself say it, you've said it probably almost enough times. Like, you can't over-communicate big decisions, big changes. You can't. Even if you're tired of hearing yourself say it, the team's just now walking into it, and it's just now getting ingrained in them.
So the themes I'm hearing here when it comes to getting better at decision-making is having those principles in place and making sure you have the right discernment, the people around you to then make that decision, and then communicating that decision to the team with a lot of clarity. That is the right way to go about it. But for people like me, I'm lower on the D, on the disc. When it comes to that decisiveness, I just tend to want to make sure I want everyone to be happy. And so talk to that person out there who wants to get better at this. They want to build that habit of decision-making, but they're not sure where to get started.
I think I'm so different from you in that regard. It's hard to make it a simple like
jump in
here's
those
where to
shoes.
start, but just make some decisions that feel like they'd be non-fatal, right? Like this decision does have implications, but they're not so severe that worst case scenario, quickly think about it. What is the worst thing that could happen as a result of me making this decision? Okay, I can live with that. That's not the end of the world. That's not a fatal error or a fatal flaw. So like, I'm just going to go and make this decision. Just do that once a day if you can, and then continue doing that until it becomes a habit. And it's something that you just get accustomed to doing, and you become comfortable with the discomfort of those implications, and they can get larger and have more implications to them.
Well, this is one of those habits that if you're not great at this, it's going to impact your business this year. So I really hope people take this to heart and take the steps necessary to get better at the habit of decision making.